Welcome, listeners of WHFB AM 1060 and WIMS AM 1420, as we launch another edition of the Green Radio Network. Here on the Green Radio Network, we'll bring you a variety of green topics and the latest information on green technology and transportation. This program features environmental leaders throughout northern Indiana and the entire nation. The Green Radio Network is sponsored by NIRPC, the Northwestern Indiana Regional Planning Commission, and the award-winning South Shore Clean Cities. Both entities are leaders in the environmental industry and work together to bring cleaner air and more sustainable living to northern Indiana. Now to introduce Carl Lisek, Executive Director of South Shore Clean Cities and the host of the show.
Well, thank you for that introduction. Today our guest is Mr. Joe Exl. He's the Senior Water Resource Planner for the Northwestern Indiana Regional Planning Commission, NIRPC. Joe, welcome back to the show.
Glad to be back. Always fun.
Always fun, Joe. And again, I think you're just a wealth of information and talking about some of our water resources. Let's talk a little bit about what you do as a Senior Water Resource Planner. I know we've talked about that in the past, but let's remind our listeners what you do, Joe.
Sure. It's varied from day to day. NIRPC is primarily noted for its regional land use planning and transportation planning. So part of my work entails being on the front end of road and highway construction and an environmental review process. I do what they call red flag investigations that try to be kind of on that front end of a project, a concept of what potential impacts there might be with road construction. So we look at things like, are there endangered, threatened, rare species in that area? Are there any other sort of environmental potential impacts, such as impacts to wetlands or floodplains? Are there things like state cleanup sites, hazardous material type concerns? Okay. So, a lot of reviews with those. Kind of depends on how busy road construction is in the area.
Sure.
But another part of my job is working with local groups, agencies, municipalities on water resource protection. So NIRPC, since I've been with the agency, we've done a lot of work with some of these groups on watershed management planning, providing technical assistance to them. Sometimes it's helping with mapping with some of the resources that we have.
Okay.
A geographic information system. It's kind of expensive software.
It is.
And a lot of folks don't have access to that. So we help them out with that, help a little bit with water quality analysis. We have some statistical packages that we can do some analysis at the office. So the day varies, which makes my job interesting and a lot more exciting.
Absolutely. And again, I think, as we start the 2017 construction season, let's say that, it just appears that, every indication is there's going to be a lot of infrastructure work that's going to be going on, not just in Northwest Indiana, but across the state, and, how that's going to impact not only your job, but, the activities of us in transportation moving in and around, northern Indiana. So it's, it just appears that everything is, there's going to be a lot of work, and it sounds like you're going to be a busy man.
Yes, definitely.
So, as you talked a little bit about, some of the watershed planning, let's talk a little bit about the Deep River Watershed Initiative. What is that?
Okay, so that's an effort that we started about 3 years ago. NIRPC was awarded a grant from the Indiana Department of Environmental Management. Okay. We received a Section 319 grant, which is passed through from the Environmental Protection Agency to the state, and the state awards that out. But those funds allowed us to develop a watershed management plan. That plan is basically like a restoration plan.
Okay.
How do I restore a water resource, in this case, Deep River and its tributaries, for a variety of water quality issues or issues with the biological communities, things like the fish and the insects that live in the river, is coming up with a restoration plan. How do we recover that river? So the first 3 years, we primarily focused on developing a watershed management plan, and now we're getting ready to move into implementation.
Wow.
So a significant portion of those funds that we were awarded is to get projects on the ground to begin that restoration work.
Okay. And do you have an RFP out on that, or did you just recently have an RFP out on that?
We just got word here a couple weeks ago from IDEM that our cost share program, which is the funding that we have available, has been approved, that we can go ahead and start promoting, which is kind of on air today to help promote this and start spending those dollars, getting those projects on the ground.
And so, like, what would be a project? Let's just talk a little bit about that. So, like, if someone was interested in being a part of this solicitation, what would be kind of a project that you would look for?
So it kind of varies. The Deep River Watershed, it's a huge area.
It is a huge
draining
area.
to Lake Michigan. It's about 180 square miles. We have a whole bunch of communities. I think there's like over a dozen communities that are within there. But we still have some of those very rural areas. So within our developed areas, we're looking at things that basically capture and treat rain or snowmelt as close to the site as possible.
Okay.
That's kind of a little bit of a quantum shift in the way we've treated stormwater runoff in the past.
Okay.
Where before, most of our infrastructure and how we developed our communities was get the water off site as close as possible. So practices that we're trying to promote in those more urbanized areas really try to treat stormwater as close to the source as possible where that rain falls or that snow melts. So we're looking at things like, I think rain gardens becoming a little bit more
a household name. Yeah,
household
it's more common.
name.
Yeah,
So that's
definitely more
great.
common.
So things like that, we're definitely focusing a little bit more on urban forestry. So that is really cool, trying to increase our urban tree canopy. Trees are one of those resources that their ability to treat stormwater runoff actually improves with age. There's not too many. There's not too many stormwater management practices that increase with their ability to treat stormwater runoff improves with age. So that's pretty cool there. Some of the other things that we're looking at is natural revegetation.
Sure.
So this is a nice kind of crossover point for folks that are interested in the loss of like pollinators, like bees. Bee populations are crashing. So what type of native vegetation can we put on the ground that helps reduce stormwater runoff, but has that secondary benefit providing habitat for pollinators, whether it's bees or butterflies, things like that.
Just, it's wonderful information. And again, I think a lot of times we forget how many scientists are at NIRPC and, just working with the communities and, improving our quality of life throughout northern Indiana. So that sounds like very exciting stuff. And so let's talk about websites. How would people get a hold to find out about this or attend some of the public meetings that you're going to be having on this?
Okay. Yeah. So the launching off point, the best website to go to is NIRPC's homepage, www.nirpc.org. Once you're on our homepage, just click underneath the Environment tab, and you'll see a Deep River Watershed Initiative link on there. And that takes you to the launch and off.
Sure. And I know you just recently improved your website, and it's different. It's
different.
There's a lot of information on the website. And, congratulations on that. I know that was probably a huge undertaking.
Yes, definitely for some of our staff, it was. It was meant to have the look and feel and follow along with our comprehensive regional plan, our 2040 plan. Okay. So it's got that essence built into it.
It does. So, we talked a little bit about the Watershed Initiative, and, you talked about some of the initiatives or some of the projects you're looking at. So some of the key issues that are affecting the stream health in this watershed.
Yeah. So, like I said, this is a really big drainage area, a lot of different land uses in there. It's primarily, if you look at the footprint of human land uses in there, a majority of it is within developed areas, but also agricultural. So with that being said, our primary issues are going to be nutrient and sediment runoff from any sort of activity that disturbs the soil surface. So that could be like row crop tillage for our agricultural areas. It might include things like home construction in those urban areas. Also, one of the big things is pathogens. Most people, when we talk about pathogens, are probably most aware of like beach closures.
Sure, absolutely.
So E. coli. That's one of our big issues for the inland waterways as well, those threats to recreational uses with pathogens. Some of the potential sources we're finding out with that include some of the historic type stuff like cattles or pastures next to streams, or where the cattle actually have direct access to the stream. For the more developed areas, I would say septic systems.
Oh, sure. And there's still quite a few septic systems in our area.
There are a lot. I was surprised even to find the amount of septic systems in our developed areas. Like my hometown is the city of Portage.
Okay.
And working with some of the folks there, was surprised to find out the number of folks within town that are still on septic systems, even though we've got sewers throughout. Septic system operation, maintenance, and care is one of our, one of our big pushes. So, some of the kind of the typical stormwater runoff related type issues. But when we were developing a watershed management plan, what we found out was really the primary driver behind some of the biological impairments, basically the fish and macroinvertebrates, aquatic insects, communities not being what they should. What we found out is that it's actually habitat disturbance.
Really?
Yep. And not so much, I'm not saying it wasn't part of the issue, the stormwater runoff, but it's that habitat disturbance. So like when the area is first being developed, like 100 years ago with like for agricultural development or more developed like in-town areas, drainage. Kind of mentioned that earlier. So a lot of ditches were dug in these areas to improve the ability to farm that land, get the water off the landscape, but also to help prevent flooding. Well, what we're seeing is that those ditches being, dug like 100 plus years ago are having an impact still to this day, even on some of our natural stream reaches within the watershed, like Deep River.
Wow, that's amazing.
Yeah.
And again, I think just as a layperson, sometimes you don't even realize that. And, again, I think, every time that you're on the show, we're always learning more about the things that NIRPC is involved with. And, it's like, how do you stay on top of all this stuff, Joe?
Partnerships.
There you go.
It all comes down to collaboration and partnerships. It's, a lot of this information I'm still like learning today, meeting new people in some of these municipalities, different agencies and so forth. And it's really kind of keeping an open mind, I guess, on some of these things. You can't talk about like water quality and restoration without having an understanding with like the communities and so forth is economic development. It's trying to find that balance between economic development, water quality protection, habitat preservation.
Sure.
There's a lot of linkages there. So
there is a lot of linkages, and I think that's one. Again, it's not just it's improving the quality of life for not just one community. It's improving the quality of life for Northern Indiana. So very interesting stuff, Joe. You're listening to the Green Radio Network here on AM 1420 WIMS Radio and AM 1060 WHFB. I'm your host, Carl Lisek. I'll be right back with Mr. Joe Exl of NIRPC right after this.
There's nothing more important than spending time outdoors with your family. That's why it's so important to do whatever you can to keep our air clean. It's good for the environment and good for the health of your friends and family. Take a closer look at how poor quality is affecting our community. Across the 3 counties of Northwest Indiana, recent studies from the American Lung Association show that 9% of adults suffer from asthma, 4% live with chronic bronchitis, 38% have a form of cardiovascular disease, and 10% of the children in Lake and LaPorte counties struggle with pediatric asthma. Now, the number of adults with asthma is nearly that of adults with diabetes. Consider how diabetics make adjustments to their diet in order to be as healthy as possible. Everyone can make adjustments to improve air quality and the quality of life for those who live with asthma and other lung diseases. Northwest Indiana, clean air, think green, breathe easy. A message from NIRPC.
Welcome back to the Green Radio Network here on AM 1420 WIMS Radio and AM 1060 WHFB. I'm Carl Lisek of South Shore Clean Cities, here to bring you the latest information on green projects and topics across the nation. Our guest today is Mr. Joe Exl. He's the Senior Water Resource Planner for the Northwestern Indiana Regional Planning Commission, NIRPC. And Joe, we were just talking a little bit about the watershed, the Deep River Watershed Initiative, and some of the things. So, we were just talking about who would be an eligible applicant for this type of grant program.
Okay, so with our cost share program, the way that we wound up setting it up is we're primarily going to be focusing on public areas for the most part, especially within the municipalities. So working with the cities and towns on what their easements are, school properties, roads and highways. One of the major reasons that we did that focus instead of just the individual homeowners in an urban environment really comes down to the ability for long-term maintenance and care with some of these restoration activities. The way that the grant is set up, one of the requirements the Department of Environmental Management has put on us is that wherever these projects are put in place, there has to be a minimum of basically 10 years.
Okay.
So, that starts to become a bit of a concern if I were to do that with an individual like land or their home and so forth, if they sell it and there's a rain garden installed in front and the new homeowner is like, I don't know what that is.
Exactly.
I don't like the way that looks. I'm going to go ahead and fill it. That's a little bit, it winds up being an issue. So we're primarily going to be working with those public spaces, including businesses.
Wonderful.
On some of these stormwater practices. The only real exception to that is in our more rural areas where we're going to be looking to work with our farmers. And the way that we're doing that is we're going to be partnering up with our soil and water conservation districts, our natural resource conservation service, to help go out and promote and meet with those landowners. Those are the experts in the agricultural community.
So true.
So working along with their strong points to kind of reach out to some of these agricultural landowners to get these practices in place.
And again, I think that's always been something that we've been looking at with air quality with some of the older tractors and some of the things that, the farmers have and some of their older equipment. Diesel engines run forever, and trying to help them replace these diesel engines with cleaner burning, alternative fuels or cleaner burning newer diesel engines. So, that's going to be an undertaking, I'm sure.
Definitely. Then one of the greatest challenges there, I guess, is that, having to realize that they are also interested in the bottom line.
Yes.
So trying to find practices that help them, meet that bottom line, but also provide a water quality or habitat benefit. So we're kind of primarily focusing on soil health.
Okay. Joe, as you talk about that, I think it's all about education. As you said, again, it's all about partnerships. It's about collaboration. And I think that's one of the things that, that we've seen with NIRPC is education is really the key. Is like, I don't think there's anybody that wants to have poor air quality, poor land quality, poor water quality. And we think we're doing a lot of the right things just because of, some of the experiences, some of the education that we've had in the past. And today with some of the new practices and new studies that we've come across, that's not true. And so working as a public outreach organization as NIRPC does, how do people get involved? To do these things, to become aware of this. Potentially there might be a business that is not listening to our radio show that a community partner might say, hey, here's someone I think that really would benefit from working with Joe Exl and NIRPC.
Okay, so we have a couple of mechanisms in place. We do use a little bit of social media. Like we have a Facebook page for the Deep River Watershed Initiative. I haven't personally, with the initiative, gotten too involved with like tweeting or anything like that, but NIRPC does. So for those folks that use Twitter, we do kind of keep it still old school and so forth on print media. We will utilize that venue whenever possible of getting information out. radio shows. We also have like an email listserv that we utilize for the Deep River Watershed Initiative and other NIRPC related programs. So multiple venues out there, and we try to share information when we have like a field day event or something coming up. Maybe we're going to be doing something on volunteer stream monitoring, how to get involved or learn how to do water quality monitoring. We'll put information out there like that. For municipalities, we're just kind of working with the networks, word of mouth, and the other venues that I just kind of mentioned of like say, for instance, urban forestry program. It's like, hey, Arbor Day is coming up. Hey, let's go ahead and do a tree planting. And also when we do, a tree planting, let's talk about long-term maintenance and care of those trees. So providing a workshop for municipalities or individuals that are responsible for maintaining trees in our public places.
Sure. I know we had talked about this maybe on one of the last shows that you were on, but one of the problems that we have with the ash trees, and is it, how's that coming? Is that resolved, or is that still an issue in our area?
It's not resolved. It's still an issue.
Okay.
NIRPC was just recently awarded a grant from the U.S. Forest Service.
Wonderful.
Where basically we're going to be trying to replace as much of the urban tree canopy as we can. Our goal this year is to get, I'm trying to remember the exact number, it's several hundred trees in the ground within the Lake Michigan drainage.
Okay, wonderful. And again, I think, just from my knowledge, I just remember what a huge issue that was to majority of our communities in that we work with here at NIRPC. And, the devastation that it had also. Yep.
So there are definitely areas that were more impacted than others. But once again, that's going to come out to messaging is selecting a diversity of trees. So we don't have that issue, going down the road. It's not a question, if another pest is going to come through and have an impact. It's when. So it's planting, like in this case, a diversity of trees, not just one single species that if a pest comes in, a lot of them are very tree specific.
Sure, they are.
That it's not going to impact every tree within my community. Sure. So diversity.
So, as we wrap up our show, Joe, is there any closing thoughts that you'd like to talk about? I know with the grant program, and people, being aware of this, again, to get this information, they go to the website, nirpc.org. Any other opportunities for people to get involved in some of your other initiatives?
I would say that's the kind of the best ones. To sign up for one of our listservs or check out when we have meetings coming up. We've got information specifically about the cost share program, eligible areas for funding. We've got like $333,000 approximately that we need to spend by the end of 2017.
Sure.
So,
and, I know you talked a little bit about the reporting requirements. A lot of times people will look at this and say, oh my gosh, it's just too much work. And, I'd beg to differ with that. I think, from working with NIRPC, a lot of the grant programs that we've been involved with NIRPC, yes, there's reporting requirements, but I don't think they're as cumbersome sometimes as maybe people make them out to be. Is like, you talked about collaboration. And I think there are opportunities that are going to improve the quality of life here in northern Indiana. And for us to get these funding mechanisms available to us, there's certain requirements that we have to abide by. But I think, with this 10-year commitment, that's a long time.
Yep.
And things happen, things change, and again, I think things have happened in the past that we've worked through, but we want to take advantage of this, improving our area. And, if you have any questions, I would say just reach out to Joe and the NIRPC staff, because we would love to see this implemented and get numerous grant applications coming in on behalf of NIRPC. So it's great. So any closing thoughts as I've taken up your time here?
Oh, no. That's really it. And even if we don't know the answers over at NIRPC, we're more than happy in a lot of cases to kind of explore and reach out to our other partners that maybe that's their strong point. So.
Yes. And, and again, I just compliment NIRPC on the great work that you do. And I think, again, as a citizen here of Northwest Indiana, a lot of times people just did not know the acronym, and what NIRPC does. But, so many of the services that NIRPC provides it just improves the quality of life here in northern Indiana. So keep up the good work. We're very proud of the work. We're proud of being, one of NIRPC's partners, and we look forward to hearing more maybe about some of the award winners on the next show when you come on to talk about, some of the projects that have been awarded through this grant project. So, keep up the good work, Joe, and that will do it for today's edition of the Green Radio Network. I'm your host, Carl Lisek. Thanks again to our guest, NIRPC Senior Water Resource Planner, Mr. Joe Exl, and be sure to join us again on AM 1420 WIMS Radio and AM 1060 WHFB for the next edition of the Green Radio Network. And please remember, it's never too late to begin your environmental legacy. Thank you, everybody.